Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk today about a project I've been working on for about 6 or 7 years in a high school near Portland, Clackamas High School. And it's related to stream restoration. And what's interesting about stream restoration, you may not know this, it is a billion-dollar business in the Pacific Northwest. And there's almost no evidence, biological evidence, that stream restoration is actually effective in improving the function of the streams. And that's mainly, I think, because of the challenge of getting baseline pre-data before the restoration projects are carried out. So in many restoration projects are thinking about using stream invertebrates as an indicator of improved function. And so why would we use stream invertebrates? Well, they reflect stream function, so you can look at not just the community of organisms, but you can functionally categorize those communities. They're at the appropriate scale, so when we do restoration projects, we're thinking about reach level scale, so the insects generally spend their lives in that reach level scale. They're relevant to the primary driver of restoration efforts, that is to restore salmon habitat. Insects are pretty easy to collect, and permitting is simple. So why would we use citizen monitoring? Well, there's an obvious need for data. So as I said earlier, there's almost no studies with baseline macroinvertebrate data associated with restoration project, and as everyone kind of talked about today, we can get these 3 for 1s: education, stewardship, and then the data that we need. And then also help meeting MS4 permits. So water service agencies have to spend a certain amount of money on education and outreach, and so this helps them meet those permit requirements. These are some of my students collecting rock creek. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about the partnership. So this is Clackamas County Water and Environment Services pretty much funds this project. It's a partner is the North Clackamas School District and then Portland State University. And the basic program structure is I go in 1 or 2 days of pre-class time, so I'll spend a day or 2 talking about stream restoration, and we have some case studies. I spend a day teaching them how to identify insects and how to collect them. Then we go out into the field and spend a day out in the field, actually a short field trip, collect the data, then I come back in for at least 1 or 2 follow-up days where we do data analysis and look at our results. And we have a little bit of luck, and the reason I say that is, you'll see in a second, we had this baseline data about 5 years before the restoration project began, and then we just got lucky that they decided to do the restoration work on the same site we've been sampling for 5 years. So there are 2 streams here that are important to know about. These are Balls Creek and Rock Creek, so our location here is just up in northwest Oregon. We have Rock Creek, which is where the restoration took place down here, and then I have an associated data set, Balls Creek, which will be explained here, is important in a second. So these are 2 pretty small watersheds located right outside Portland. Okay, so the restoration site, I don't know a lot about the engineering of restoration, but this is the schematic, and we have multiple agencies working on the site, and this is the access point. We actually pull up right here in the school buses and walk down to the stream and collect the data. So the restoration plan is basic channel reconfiguration, the addition of large wood and boulders, riparian planting. So the idea is that they're improving the habitat complexity, providing refugia during high flow events. And if you look carefully at these pictures, I know it's hard to see, this tree right there is this tree right here. So this is the before, pretty simple channel. And then here you can see they've really improved the habitat complexity, added some sinuosity to the stream, and then these large wood additions, and then there's boulders as well, boulder placement. And so what we have here is what we call a BACI design, and BACI stands for before, after, control, I think it's intervention or impact, I can never remember. And this is important, and this is where the other watershed comes in. The idea is that when you're looking at the response of a stream to restoration, you have to make sure that that response is something that didn't happen kind of globally or regionally. So it's almost like a climate control for your restoration site, your study site. So we went out every fall and spring with the students. We did seasonal sampling, and we did family level taxonomy. And in order to do this, I had to develop a non-lethal method that I wanted to use with students. I thought it was really important that we didn't kill insects when we went out in the field. So the first thing I developed several years ago was this field guide that was focused on the characteristics you can see with the naked eye and the characteristics that the insects may exhibit when they're alive. So for example, some of the spiny crawlers will pulse their gills in a really distinctive way. And so we use those characteristics as an indicator for the family. And I brought some copies of the field guide. If you guys want a copy, you're more than welcome to test that back that way. Please go ahead and take one. They're waterproof paper. They're really useful guides. And if we run out, you can just email me and I'll send you one. And the other thing I wanted to do was to develop a non-lethal method. So basically, and I'm going to explain the method in a second, but basically what we do is the field trips have to take place within the confines of the classroom time period. So the teachers don't want to pull kids out for multiple classes. You've probably seen that in your work. So it really has to be quick. It has to generate good data. So we're literally 1 hour and 45 minutes. That includes bus travel time. So the kids are there. We're down in the stream. Half hour, 45 minutes collecting. I verify, or my assistant verifies all the insects, and we put them back in the stream. And this is a randomized method. So what we do is we go in and we take a composite sample. So we do left, middle, right of the string. We composite those into a tub. Then we run them through this little randomized subsampling routine. We pour the insects into this tray, and the students select 5 random cells with a little random number sheet. That's their favorite part of the picture. And they pull those 5 cells out, put them in the ice cube tray, and then I verify them, so I have their data sheet and their ice cube trays in front of me. I verify them, make sure all the counts are correct, IDs are correct, and then once they're verified, they return the insects to the string. So this is kind of how the schematic works. So the nice thing about it is it's flexible for different class sizes. If you have 4 or 5 students, you just generate one data set. But what you can do is you have multiple groups of students collecting, and then you can generate this data set. It's kind of interesting. So each one of these columns is a group of students collecting. So because everyone uses the same method and uses the same randomized subsampling technique, you can take the sum of this data, and then that becomes your sample. So not only do you get these kind of good counts, 330 insects or so, if you were interested, you can also calculate the variability associated with those each group's data. So just some quick numbers here, because I'm sure you're interested in this stuff. Basically 9th to 12th grade, I do have middle school curriculum, but we're not using that data yet. I've got about 7 years of sampling, 11 sites, 4 different schools. And what I'd like to just draw your attention to is notice this is the area that was subsampled on each trip. And notice the increasing number of area we've collected and the increasing number of students. And that's because once one teacher realizes the other teacher's doing it and it's generating a good data set, then you get them on board. And so we see this kind of inertia develop within the schools and within the school system where the teachers are communicating and talking to each other about this stuff. And I'm pretty excited. That's 1,500 students in 5 years. Pretty impressive. Okay, so if we think about restoration as a disturbance, because they bring in all this heavy equipment, they reconfigure the channel, we can make some predictions about what we would expect to see on the immediate data set following the restoration activity. So we'll look at today some data for richness, density, EPT or the mayfly, stonefly caddisflies. I categorize them as long-lived insects. We can look at dipteran, and then I have a couple of biotic metrics as well that I'll show you. So I'm going to put up this graph. I'm just going to give you a second to kind of get yourself oriented. So the dark line is Rock Creek. That's where the restoration work happened. The gray line is Balch Creek. That's our control, our regional control. This line here is where the restoration took place. So we couldn't collect data in spring of 14 because all the heavy equipment was down there. And every one of these graphs will have 2 charts. There'll be different things. This one is taxa richness, and this one is density of organisms. I'll also have percent and density. I'll show you here in a second. So what you're looking for is you're looking for the change between the baseline data for Rock Creek and the post after the restoration work, what happens to the data for Rock Creek, and then also noting that there is no change in the Balch Creek. That means that the signal we see in Rock Creek is not something that was observed kind of globally or regionally due to climate or some other factor like that. So you can see here that the richness really did not change. And that's actually what we would expect, because what you get is replacement of tolerant taxa with sensitive taxa with tolerant taxa. Same with density. So this is invertebrate density per tenth of a meter. And what you see here is the baseline. There is no real difference between the baseline conditions for Rock Creek and the post conditions, except for this spring. We had this huge jump up. And these were almost all small minnow mayflies, the betas. And those are prey for stoneflies. So what you see is, I think, if I can interpret this, that we see this lack of predators is causing this substantial increase in small minnow mayflies. These are total EPT, so this is just the total number of mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies. We look at those because we know that those are sensitive organisms. And so the top chart is density, and the bottom chart is percent. They show two different things. So anyway, what you see is a big drop in total EPT after the restoration project, and it's beginning to return. This is one of my favorite charts here. Look at the return back to equilibrium for EPT, and this consistent data along that line. That's telling me that the students are collecting data that actually reflects what's going on in the streams. Long-lived, you see the same pattern, a significant drop after the restoration site, and then begin return to equilibrium. Here you see kind of the same thing. And then Precipitiptera. Dipterans are very small prey, very tolerant. The populations went through the roof right after the restoration, and now they're returning back to equilibrium. Look at this consistency in the data set. It's pretty impressive. And then we have the other biotic metrics. You guys are probably familiar with IBI scores, where you see here, the higher the IBI score, the better the conditions. So you see a drop and a return. EPT richness is another metric we use. And again, you see a drop and then a return to equilibrium. So, what are our major findings? The data are tracking expected response and return to equilibrium, which we would expect to see. The functional metrics tell a better story than the richness and the density metrics, which we would expect. Citizens can collect useful data. We've seen that all day today, which I think is interesting. And restoration partnerships have inertia. So what can I recommend? At least 3 years of pre-data, 5 years would be better. At least family-level taxonomy. Curriculum must add value. I know you guys have seen this when you're working with teachers. If you can't add value to their teaching, they're not going to want to work with you. Budget categories matter. If you go from an education budget into the restoration budget, the money it costs to do this stuff with the teachers pales in comparison to what it costs to rent a tractor and get it down into the stream. And so we're going to continue doing this, and I've actually added a new site to the program. So sponsored by Portland State Student Watershed Research Project in Clapham. Thank you.
Okay, questions?
For continued and potentially new funding and scaling to other places too, have you been asked to provide any learning outcome data to demonstrate that students are actually improving in sciences?
Yeah, I demonstrate pre-post surveys.
And then are these also students who are in it for 1 year, like a particular grade, or are there some who are 3-4 years of participation?
So what the county's now asked me to do is they want to extend it from middle school through 9th grade and then through 12th grade.
So get consistency with the students.